Welcome to Who Knows, and today I have somebody who knows all about gender ideology. Beth Bourne, thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Henry.
I mean, first off, I basically wanted to say I'm sorry that you're going through all this, one with your family. I have kids myself, and I empathize with what you're going through. And then, secondly, I'm sure it's just not a fun topic to work on every day, regardless of what's going on with your family. So I'm sorry that you're in this situation. I appreciate that you are working hard at it, but I'm sure it's not fun.
Yeah, it can be pretty dark at times. So thank you.
I can imagine. Why don't we start with your background and your story?
Well, yeah, I kind of grew up overseas, and I have conservative parents, but I ended up in college, becoming a liberal, right? And so voted Democrat, um, my entire adult life, until I kind of saw what was happening, maybe 2020, um, around the school lockdowns, but more about gender ideology. So I live in Davis, California. Um, it is a bubble in a bubble, right? We have the University of California, Davis here. It's 85% Democrat. And I thought I loved that, right? I loved living in a town where everybody kind of thought alike. But when I started speaking out about what was happening in my family with my daughter, who suddenly took on this trans identity, along with several of her friends in her friend groups. This is 2018, so I started speaking out with my friends, and I realized that they didn't even want to hear about my concerns, right? And so um, I work at the university, and there that was the same thing. Like, you can't really have a questioning. You can't be critical or think about this issue. And then I started to realize it has become so politicized, and it shouldn't be. So I've just spent a lot of time over this last 5 years trying every way possible to move the needle. And so I focused on the medical scandal around this, and males and female sports, girls and women's sports in our spaces, and then, of course, the indoctrination in our California public schools. So those are the three areas. Um, but yeah, I've become almost, I don't know what you'd call a full-time activist, accidental activist, or advocate for, trying to protect our kids and, women and vulnerable people being hurt by this.
Oh, I was muted. I wanted to ask more about your daughter, so you can share as much or as little as you want. But the two aspects I was curious about is what was happening in her school back at this time, and then with her medical care, those two arenas.
Yeah, sure. So, um, this was 2017, 2018, and I didn't realize that not only had the curriculum changed in her health class and her science classes, but they also had trained all the teachers and counselors at her junior high school on, how to support the LGBTQ kids. And it really was just the trans kid, right? They'd gone to some trainings in Palm Springs that were put on by trans activists. Um, so she was being told while she was at school that she can socially transition and change her name and her pronouns and use the boys' locker rooms at her junior high school. But at the same time, and this is what was really shocking to me, is in a wellness visit with her Kaiser pediatrician. She was just there because she wasn't feeling well. Um, the doctor overheard my ex-husband, who was also in the room, right? We were both at her wellness visit. Um, and the doctor heard these male pronouns and said to my daughter, "Hey, I hear, your dad's using, can we change your medical records? Can I change your name on here?" And she was so excited to hear my daughter wanting to be called by this male name. And right then, she referred my daughter to the gender clinic at Kaiser Permanente here in Oakland. They have it's called the Proud Gender Clinic, and it's a pediatric gender clinic. And the doctor called it a one-stop shop where my daughter could, talk to an endocrinologist, she said a social worker, a gender specialist, an OBGYN, and that all her, her gender affirming needs would be met there. And I was shocked. I called the doctor the next day and I said, you can't suggest to a child that they become medicalized. The first time you hear, they want to explore this identity. And I even spoke to the endocrinologist, um, the next day, and I asked him, why would you put a child on puberty blockers or hormones? I think I said, what would you do? And when he told me that, I said, well, what are the long-term studies? And he said, well, there really are none. It's an emerging science, and that, but we know that there's less chances of um, suicide I can't ideation if you put a child on these blockers and hormones. Um, Anyways, the whole thing just seemed so insane to me that that my daughter would be the guinea pig, right? She would be the first cohort of kids to be put on these
Oh.
drugs that even then we knew that they were hurting brain development and bone density and fertility. Um, so I was fortunate I was able to my ex-husband was in through a psychiatrist, we were able to say no medicalizing of my daughter, until she was an adult.
Mm.
So that bought me a few more years, and during those years, all I focused on was how did we get to this place? How did she think that she could become, go from being a girl to growing up to be a man, and just really how dangerous it is. And so I just started speaking out. But, I didn't say anything the first few years because I needed to keep
Yeah.
my daughter close. So everything was done behind the scenes, without, putting my name out there or, showing up at a school board meeting. Everything was done very quietly. So when people say to me, well, you should try a different approach that, you might get more traction if you were, just did weren't so much in people's faces, and I'm like, "No, I tried that for years. I tried it
Hmm.
for years, and no one is willing to have a discussion, and no one's willing to, like, really look at what's out there."
So then, yeah, take us through the progression of your view of transgenderism. Going back, kind of where we all start, where you don't really have an opinion because you either haven't read about it, doesn't affect you personally, and you're just like, I don't really know, haven't thought about it. So we all kind of start there, and then you go through what you did with your daughter before the medical intervention. Then there's this threat of the medical intervention through Kaiser Permanente, and now you are where you are today. Take us through how you are viewing the issue at each stage up to now.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like I said, I live in Davis, so I can remember back so vividly to the first time I heard about transgender children in Davis, and it was at my
Mm,
daughter's kindergarten classroom, and it was talking to other moms out front of the school, and one of the moms said, this family, they had 3 boys, that they decided the 3rd boy was actually a transgender girl because, he was enjoying wearing, ballet outfits. His mom was a ballerina, and so, these other mom friends of mine, they all had gone to Ivy League schools, and they all had their graduate degrees, um,
yeah.
they all were like, "Well, we need to support this family and this child, and now we're gonna use this new name." And I just thought, "Gosh, this doesn't sit well with me." Like, how did this mom know that her son was a transgender child? And so I just tried to look a little bit online about it,
Hmm.
and I knew there were a couple other um, trans identified kids. This is 2013 here at the school, and the whole thing just made me feel kinda uncomfortable, but I didn't really do anything about it. A couple years later in 2012, I was at a cross country race in San Francisco, and there was clearly he was a man wanting to identify into our women's cross country race, and everyone was going along with it, and I just thought, "Wow, this is kind of weird." But again, I still didn't do very much. It's like you just know it feels uncomfortable and wrong, but, you're not gonna say why. Um, and then when I started seeing and hearing more, about what was in the schools, um, that's when it started to impact my family personally, and so I just started asking a little more, but it took a couple years before I was really, like, telling the school district, "Hey, I'm gonna," they wanted to show me the curriculum in my daughter's classroom, and it was just a binder, and so I said, like with handouts. I said, "No, I wanna sit in the classroom. I wanna hear the
Mm,
gender identity unit be taught as part of her health class." And so, they allowed me to sit in my son's class. He's a couple years younger, and I sat in the back of the room, his ninth grade health, and I watched these slides and videos be shown to the kids, and it's shocking, and it's happening in every public school in California. They showed pictures of Bruce Jenner, now as a she, as Caitlyn Jenner. They showed, two women who'd had double mastectomies, and you could still see the scars on them. One woman was pregnant with facial hair as, the trans man. Um,
mm.
and yeah, it's just all very confusing curriculum, right? If you present the idea that, there are these trans people, it's easy for kids to want to believe that if they're not comfortable with who they are. And so, yeah, I just, it's been, it's been hard because sometimes I get mad at myself that I didn't see what was going on earlier and I didn't do more to protect my daughter. And, I didn't realize she was on Tumblr and Reddit and a lot of this
Mhm.
ideologies on there. And she's incredibly gifted. She's a National Merit Scholar and perfect SAT. So she's reading a couple years ahead of her level. And so it was easy for her, as a 10 or 11, 12-year
Mm.
old to be on these adult um, chats talking about issues like being trans. And she is, it's like the perfect storm. We had gender ideology come into the schools, but we also had our daughters for the first time on their smartphones, right?
Yep.
And social media. And so, um, I didn't realize that the combination of what her teachers and her counselors are telling her and what she's seeing on her social media and her smartphone, and then, just yeah, I dropped the ball on all of that. So, but
Well, about how old are your kids now?
so now they're 20 and 17.
So that's what I've been saying. I think that's been the hardest age group to raise in the last many generations. So before that, like I'm a millennial. Before that, I didn't grow up with a smartphone. I remember getting a computer and it was dial up, and if we were to use it, it would block the landline, so you could only use it for a little bit. And there's none of this stuff. And I got a flip phone for college, and I got a smartphone when I was like working and making money, and you know like it did not influence my childhood at all, the
Mm,
technology stuff. And then if you skip over your kids generation, like my kids are much younger than yours, we know about the issues of screens, about the internet. They weren't in school. My kids weren't in school during COVID, thankfully. They were
yeah.
too young. And then we have more information about the transgender confusion stuff. So I think kids your age have gone through, we've put them through gender ideology stuff. We locked them out of their schools for a
Mhm,
year and a half.
mhm.
We gave them smartphones and social media and had no idea what the ramifications of that was. They go to college and take out now potentially a ton of student debt to have AI replace the jobs that 22-year-olds are getting. I think it's the hardest age group to raise in a long time. I mean, have you stepped back and thought about just all the things we've placed on these kids that are about 15 to 25 now?
Yeah, I think about all the time, and uh, I my mom will sometimes say to me, just how hard my life has been as a mom and how terrifying, and I I just sometimes tell her, "Mom, back in the '70s, there was something that was happening to kids because it hurt our family too, right?" There was that whole, hippie drug generation,
Yeah.
and kids were, mostly young men were growing out their hair long and then getting, into drug use and not going to school, and so you had a whole group of young people who kind of, they got into drugs and they got into trouble and lives were lost. So
Yeah.
when my mom's like, "This is so terrible," I go, "Mom, this has happened before in history, right?" Or
Mhm.
you can look at other countries where, communism has destroyed families and family units. And um so I just tell her, there's been evil in this world for a long time, and parents
Yeah.
often get, called the villain, and we don't know what's really how our children are being brainwashed or captured by government institutions or cults or whatever you want to have it. But yeah, I totally agree with you that my daughter, especially her cohort, is the first group of kids that had the lockdowns, the smartphones,
Yeah.
all of it. And then this, the social contagion of these ideas that came in, and really impacted, the quirky, gifted, sensitive, sympathetic type, and
Mhm.
and girls, of course. And also I also repeat to my mom a lot because she is, always worried about me, is how much my generation, I was born in '70, so how much anorexia and bulimia was a part of my high school, college
Okay.
years.
Mm.
So, I was a cross country runner. So half of the girls on my cross country team, especially at the collegiate level, I ran at Cal Poly, they were anorexic, they were bulimic, and when you see other really skinny girls, you wanna look skinny like them, and, "Oh, they only eat an apple for breakfast and lunch." Well, I'm only gonna eat an apple too. And so,
Yeah.
you know, y that whole idea of, like, and also, it's about hating the way your body looks and wanting to have control, and then your brain starts to think you're overweight because you weigh 3 pounds more than, you know, you wanna weigh, and that's all you think about all day, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm also often look at, the eating disorders being similar to this, gender identity, stuff that, young people are taking on.
Yeah. That's good perspective.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, why don't we talk about what is going on in the California school system? I saw your Woodland Unified School District video in particular. Maybe we could start there as an example of what they're teaching and build
Sure,
out.
sure. Yeah, so, our school district doesn't hold a parents' information session where they invite in this is, Health Connected. It's one of the several, kind of trans activist groups around the state that
Okay.
produce this curriculum that's now required to be taught in our schools here in California. And so I pretended, or I just signed up as if I was a parent of a fifth grader in that school district so I could watch the information session. And I recorded it, and taxpayers paid for that curriculum. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to record it. And there's no reason we shouldn't have parents, seeing these videos and slides themselves.
If
Um,
they think it's right, they should be sharing it everywhere,
yeah, they should be proud of it, right?
not hiding it. Yeah.
I just wanted to
Sorry.
get the word out. So I don't know,
Yeah.
if it got, a few 100,000 views, but yeah, you know, here in California, students are required to have gender identity as part of their sex ed curriculum, and you can't opt out of just the gender identity. You have to do opt out of all of the sex ed. So it's like 5 different classes over 1 week or 2 week period. And so a lot of parents will are like, well, I don't want my child to feel uncomfortable that I'm not letting them be in their sex ed class. So I guess I'll just let them take the class. And um,
Mm.
so the curriculum, they're required to teach that there's these gender identities, and they describe gender identities as a boy um is the doctor makes a mistake when he assigns, they say assigns his gender, and that a boy can actually, even though he has a penis, he's actually can be a girl, and they show a picture of that. They're showing this to fifth graders, this little figure of, it says cisgender, so that's when a boy has a penis, and then transgender is when a boy, has a penis, but he's actually a girl. And then they try to make it like the spectrum, and, um so what else? They show examples of, like, Jazz Jennings is the one shown here in the Davis schools as, the trans girl, and it just shows very regressive images of, if your hobbies or sports or what kind of clothing you like to wear, that kinda tells you what your gender identity is.
Yep.
And yeah, and they put this whole identity map too up to show the kids that your identity is, maybe your religion and your race and so you have to always be thinking about your identity and part of who you are is this gender. And they show the genderbread person, right? That's the one that I Woodland School District showed, and we use it here in Davis too, where it shows your brain is where your gender is, and your anatomy, that's where
Yeah.
your biological sex is, but your gender identity in your brain doesn't have to match that.
Yeah, and it had something in the heart too. There's
Yeah, yeah, and your heart is your
multiple.
attraction, right? So if you
Yeah, yeah,
like, your sexual attraction, it's all, it makes no sense, right? It's, teaching this a set of almost religious beliefs, right? Because it's all
yeah.
based on, the gendered soul and this feeling of your gender. But, yeah, part of the curriculum also, they mentioned that there's these trusted adults, so, that children can find the trusted adult at their school. It could be their teacher or their principal or maybe a paraeducator, or it could be a neighbor, and that, trusted adult is someone who likes to talk with you about, your sexuality and your gender. And so, um yeah, that it is not necessarily the parent, so that's part of the curriculum, and, there's one more last part, but you get the idea. It's just really, uh oh, and also, I'm sorry, part of the curriculum is really that you need to be welcoming and inclusive, and
Mhm.
so, you don't feel uncomfortable, if there's somebody of a different gender, identity in your spaces, but yeah, it's the whole California schools pushing the idea of social emotional learning and empathy and inclusion. All of it has kind of set this place where children, especially girls, can't even speak out when they feel uncomfortable. And yeah, and
Right.
they're told that you have to believe what your teacher or counselor is saying because they might know more than your parents. So it's really splitting up
Yeah.
the families.
Yeah. Um, well, and that's the piece that's been weaponized is you're teaching kids to be nice, share, don't hit, like all these
Right.
basic things as they're young, and then you weaponize it at that moment where it's like, oh, if you see something that you know is weird, you cannot say anything. This is also being a good person. You need to be
Yes.
nice about this. You cannot, and that's been totally weaponized that thing against kids, which is because they start out incredibly based in reality. They know what a boy and a girl is.
Right.
They really, really know. I've got little kids. I've got daughters and I've got a son, and they know all of it. They
Yeah.
know all the science. They
Yeah.
know what a boy is. They laugh at their little brother.
Yeah.
They know what all these things are, and then these curriculums at worst, at best, are confusing
Right.
what kids are know to be the truth, and at worst, they're sending them into incredibly dangerous decisions.
Yeah. One of the things too I notice is, they really do introduce the idea that um, cross dressing and drag queens are normal and healthy. And so, when a child sees a someone in drag or a cross, their first feeling is like to be scared and to be frightened,
Yeah,
right? That's a normal feeling.
that's
And
good.
they've tried to,
Survival instinct.
yes. And so to teach a child that, when you see a man dressed in drag or trans person, that feeling of being uncomfortable and not feeling safe it's a feeling that you're not actually being inclusive and that you're being, bigoted. And so, they just tried to take away all kids' feelings of, having safety and boundaries, um, and that's really scary. It's
Yeah. What the woman presenting that curriculum on that presentation, genuinely thinks she's super understanding and empathetic and caring and loving. She's not, in her mind, she's not evil at all. She's doing
No.
incredible work, and she truly believes that. And it's actually the exact opposite, sadly.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you have lived around these people and been in kind of that liberal bubble. Like,
Right.
how does that strong cognitive dissonance exist?
You know, I it is incredible. I would say 95% of my friends were liberal, and I didn't realize how many of them are actually like far left liberal. And so when I started bringing up issues to my, white liberal educated women friends, hey, did you guys know there's women being raped by incarcerated men in the women's prisons? And they would say to me, "Oh, well, um, it's such a small number, or they're not really men, or that doesn't really happen. It's the prison guards that are raping women more so." And or I'd bring up the sports issue and I'd show them pictures of Leah Thomas, and my friends
Yeah,
are athletes, and I'd be like, "You guys, William Thomas is a man. He's competing against Riley Gaines. How can that be
yeah,
fair? Look at his size, his shoulders. He's a mediocre male swimmer. I mean, he's like 500th, I think, in the collegiate rankings. But now he's dominating. He's setting records in the Ivy League in swim events, and they would just either they wouldn't talk about it, or they would just make all these excuses like, well, trans athletes need to have sports too, or you know, no one's going. Well, they could be going to the Olympics, but no one's winning money, and so I've just seen
mhm,
it over and over again where women who want to be seen as empathetic and are knowledgeable, that they won't really think critically. They're so afraid that maybe their whole belief system's going to be red pilled by having to acknowledge one of these facts. And so
yeah,
yeah, I just basically said I can't even be in these friend groups anymore, and they didn't want me anyways. Because they've lost their brain, because I think they've weaponized women's feelings of wanting to be empathetic and wanting to
yeah,
be part of a group. And in a women's group, everyone has to think alike. In a men's group, men actually like to have friends that think differently, and they're okay with having some argument or feeling differently. But women all want to think alike in general. In
interesting,
these friend groups. Yeah,
interesting. But these people were the feminists 10,
exactly.
15 years ago. So where have the feminists gone? Because you can't both be wanting to protect women's sports, because if you're playing volleyball and the 6'5" volleyball guy comes in and starts breaking noses,
Right.
you can't both be a feminist and be a trans in sports person. So have you crossed have you had that discussion with anyone in particular?
I hosted an event called Fair Sports for Girls back in 2023 at our Davis Library. So I had known that there were 3 boys competing in girls sports at Davis High School. And I only knew this because I asked mothers, on the cross country team. I asked a couple coaches like, "Hey, have you noticed any transgender athletes competing in sports?" And so I was able to get their names. One boy set the ninth grade girls pole vault record. Another boy
Mhm.
was they wouldn't let him compete in varsity cross country girls because they didn't want to take away a spot, but they put him in JV, and he was crushing, winning huge invitational races, competing in girls cross country as a boy. And then another boy won the downhill ski championship for California, from
Oh
Davis High
man.
School, a boy, pretending to be a girl. And so I held this event called Fair Sports for Girls, and at the event, one of our speakers, Sophia Laurie, wanted to mention the story about, I think it was either Leah Thomas or the idea that we have biological men competing in women's sports. And our librarian said, if you use that term, biological males, instead of calling them trans women, and he said this, they're women, right? Then I will shut down your event. And we had Kim Jones on the line. She represents Icon Sports. And she said, you will be breaking the law because we have our First Amendment right to free speech. And, the federal government says that, there's Title IX. Anyways, he shut down our event. And the next day, Riley Gaines tweeted about what happened because a lot of the video went very viral. And there were all these bomb threats. And so I was blamed for the bomb threats that were happening in the schools, even though Riley Gaines had pointed out that this librarian had violated our free speech. Um, but none of my friends were willing to go to event. So these are my feminist friends who at one time believed in Title IX and believed in girls having equal opportunities in sports and having our own spaces. Not a single, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. I did have maybe 2 friends show up, but I invited like 50 good friends in town.
Mm,
And so I think the feminists, they weren't going to take on this issue of the sports issue. And I use that one a lot because I think it's the easiest one for people to see how insane it is and the
yeah.
injustices. But in that case, Alliance Defending Freedom, they contacted me. Yeah, I think the night of that the video went viral, and they said, we'd like to represent you. And so they represented us pro bono, me and the other 4 speakers in our organizations, and we won the lawsuit. This county settled for $70,000, and so that really gave me also some kind of confidence that you can speak the truth, and there's lots of people that will support you, and yeah, you have the truth on your side, and you have our First Amendment rights, which are huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for these people, I mean, their party has left them,
Yes.
and they've kind of gone a couple steps with them, and the whole party's gone 10 steps, and they've gone 3, and they really don't want to be left out in the cold. And it's kind of sad in a way because the party that you thought you used to support, like a 90s Democrats, like great, go for it,
Yeah.
is gone.
Yeah.
And either the party needs to come back to reclaim those people, or the people need to realize it's over.
Yeah.
And we're still in transition. It's a very weird time there.
Yeah, I love Colin Wright. He did that graphic, and I think Elon Musk has
Yeah,
retweeted it. But it kind of shows I'm right here, kind of, maybe a Democrat. I'm kind of to the left, but the far left keeps going like this, and I'm still staying in that same place. So,
yeah,
I don't think I've really changed that much. But I tell people I vote all red now because, from the school board to our council to our state senator, to our president, I just so badly want this us to come back to reality and sanity,
yeah,
and so I do vote red right now.
yeah. Um, okay, did we miss anything at the school curriculum laws about what they need to teach before
Oh,
I wanted to move on to UC Davis? I mean, is
oh,
there anything
sure.
else? Yeah, at the
Yes.
school
So
level.
I should have mentioned, or I'd like to mention some of the other areas in the schools, and I didn't know this, right? I had seen the curriculum, but I didn't realize, some laws had changed in California that said we now have to have menstrual products um, in the boys' bathroom. And originally it was going to be 6th grade and up, so junior high school and high schools, but then they also said starting in 3rd grade. And so I've gone out and taken videos. I've actually gone over to our schools because they have an open campus, and I've walked into the boys' bathroom and I showed the dispenser, that shows these menstrual products. And it says that, if you're non-binary or you're transgender, that, California state law now requires that we have, these menstrual products in the boys' bathroom. So that's like kindergarten, 1st grade kids going into their bathroom boys seeing these menstrual products and seeing the girls who are coming in who think that, they're now trans boys and that's where their menstrual products are in the boys' bathroom. I've also law change that said every school has to have an all genders bathroom, and so the signs all got changed here in California. So they now say bathrooms are all genders. The locker rooms here in Davis, some of they changed some of the girls' locker rooms to be all gender. Which is shocking to think that they're telling kids that they can, boys and girls in the same spaces. I don't know if there's male teachers or male PE, coaches watching girls change because it's all gender, right? So we don't even know who's
Mm.
supervising these spaces. Um, so yeah, the sports in the schools, the curriculum, um, the bathrooms. Um, oh, and the biggest thing is these gender support plans, right? So in a school, like they did with my daughter, if a child says, "Hey, teacher or school counselor or coach, I'm actually transgender or I'm non-binary or I'm gender queer. Can you please change my name? And I want to use these new pronouns." And the teacher will say, "Well, do you want your parents to know?" And the child will say, "No, no, please, just I just want to use this at school. I don't think my parents will support me." And the teacher says, "Okay, we're happy to do this." And they follow this support plan, right? Where they notify other teachers and administrators, other people's staff, and they say, "Please keep this secret from the parents. We're all going to know about this, right? Everybody in the school is going to know. The kids are going to know. The staff's going to know, but we're not going to let the parents know because they're not safe." And so, we have um, teachers telling students that they can lie to their parents and that they can keep secrets with other adults, and that's just setting up kids for so much potential danger in their life, right? You wonder, why girls get sex trafficked or, that they would not believe, somebody who's promising them things or saying, "Don't let your parents know." But this is what kids are taught. They're taught from the very beginning in California schools that your parents might not be trusted and that everyone else can keep secrets from them. So, yeah, and also I should add, in our wellness centers or, like here in Davis, we have CommuniCare on the school campuses, and CommuniCare is like Planned Parenthood. I think Long Beach and maybe LA Unified, they have Planned Parenthood in the schools, but they're bringing
Wow.
in mental health providers into the schools, and they tell kids if you're over 12, because it's state law, you can meet privately with a mental health provider at school, and it's confidential, so your parents won't know, and you could talk to them about your mental health issues, which often includes, your gender identity. And, like Karen Davis, CommuniCare does give girls free breast binders, and they provide boys with free penis tucking kits if you're over 12. And so a parent would have no way of knowing, like, my daughter's wearing a binder when she gets to school, or my son's got this tucking kit. So it's pretty sick, the whole thing.
Oh, so evil.
It is. And
So
and
evil.
I just go around collecting the receipts, right? I have so
Yeah.
much evidence, and every when I think it can't get worse, it does get worse. And so I just keep putting that mirror up to our school district and showing parents what's happening. And I am getting a lot more people thanking me. So
Mm.
um it's usually quietly, like a whisper in the grocery store or direct message, but um yeah, I think people that they know something's up.
It kind of can't be that anymore. We went through the whisper phase for a few years, and you kind of can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we are. I mean, anyway, you were talking about UC Davis, and it says
Right.
right there in your profile that 1 in 22 students identify as transgender.
Right.
So let's expand on that. What the heck is going on at UC Davis?
Yeah. So, I was so busy focusing on the schools that I didn't really even watch what was happening at the college level. Even though I worked at UC Davis, but I worked in a department out of the College of Engineering for the Institute of Transportation Studies. So almost all of our students were either international students, for grad school, or just, your typical engineer kind of student. So I wasn't seeing how gender ideology was taking over the school. We were
Yeah.
also kind of off campus or off the main campus. But I think it was for Pride Month. It was May of 2023 now. Our chancellor put together this video, a 2-minute video where he says, hey, it's Pride Month, and I'm here with, I think it was the head of the LGBTQ Resource Center. And then, this trans woman, it's a man pretending to be a woman. And then he says, we're really excited here at Davis. 1 out of every 22 students, identifies as transgender. And I just thought, wow, he's actually like, proud of this figure that, what's that, 5% of students? There's 30,000 students at the school. So I don't know what that is, like 3,000, couple thousand students are now transgender at our school when just 10 years ago it was 1 in 10,000. Um, so I just did research, right? I think it's my pinned tweet um, on my Twitter page. But, in addition to this statistic, we also offer students free cross-sex hormones, and that they're given out for free by the first and second year med students at UC Davis Medical School. So these are students giving out free hormones like candy um, to the students on campus. And then their insurance also covers these sex modification surgeries. And the more I spoke out on campus, the more I would see young women coming up to me with their double mastectomies and talking about how top surgery saved their lives. And I'm like, wow, that surgeon made $25,000 off your body. Um, I might not say this to them, but like, could there have been other things done to help you get over the trauma that you experienced, or your discomfort with your body? Um, but
Mm.
but these top surgeries are just done so frequently. And then so yeah, and then I just realized, at the school, everyone's expected to put their pronouns in their signature line on their emails, and kind of just go along with it all. And
Yeah.
I spoke out when I was in Hawaii on a vacation, and there are these drag queens in the lobby of my hotel, and I just spoke out and I said to these drag queens, I don't want you here. My child's here. I'm on vacation. And I knew at the time that, drag queens were being introduced in the junior high school curriculum as a way for boys to explore dressing up as women. And then, the next step, right, is the medicalizing of these young men. And that video went viral. And our chancellor at the university said he condemned my behavior in Hawaii on my
Yeah.
vacation. I think the governor of Hawaii said I wasn't invited back. And but yeah, I never apologized. I mean, I still think it was wrong what they had going on at the hotel.
Yeah.
And yeah, they refunded my hotel stay. But I realized at the university they wanted to make sure that I was kind of the example of what happens if you speak out, right?
Yeah.
That I actually had the chancellor. And then they put me on investigatory leave, paid leave for 8 months so they could go through all my social media and try to find anything I had done wrong. And they found nothing as far as workplace misconduct. But they did slap me on the wrist with a 2-week sexual harassment charge. I think they couldn't tell me why, but they said I either misgendered people, or that that I put things on my social media. But I have good attorneys representing me, and we're still, kind of fighting that, and this layoff that happened a couple months ago.
Yeah.
But there's a real feeling on campus, and you can hear it from all the conservative students or professors, or now I want to say conservative, just people that are concerned that, there's males in the women's bathrooms and locker rooms on campus. And, there's even a pediatrician, gastroenterologist specialist at the med school, and he speaks out on this.
Mm.
He's a UC Davis Medical School professor, clinical
Good.
professor, and practicing, and he's Yeah, Arthur de la Laurier, I think is his last name, but, he's such a brave soul
Yeah.
and a courageous man, and he wanted to retire, but his some of his students have really asked him to stay on because
Wow.
he's willing to, look at this issue of, uh, gender medicine, or I don't know what you wanna call it, but, these drugs and these surgeries that permanently harm people. So
First off, that's the most like academia thing ever that they needed 8 months to read a social media
yeah,
profile.
exactly.
It's like if it was in a like private sector, truly private sector, they'd be like, okay, we'll have an answer by this afternoon.
Yes,
But
exactly.
like
Yeah.
the government would be like, we need 14 months.
Yes.
Academia is like, give us 8 months, and then like utilities or give us 6 months, and then it's private sector below that.
Yeah. Yeah, he asked for a public records request to see how much money they spent on these outside attorneys. I think it was like $65,000. And these attorneys were super woke out of Oakland,
Yeah.
but, and I don't know how much resources were spent on, in-house counsel, but
Oh man,
yeah, I mean,
insane.
yeah, it was such a waste of time and resources and just a way to, you know,
It's theater.
yeah, exactly. Make other staff and faculty feel concerned, like, "Wow, look what happened to Beth.
Yeah.
She hasn't been able to work in 8 months. This could happen to me."
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that I was willing to give up my job, or my livelihood to fight this, and so, but most people can't, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think all this, you've left some breadcrumbs, but I think where this brings us is who is behind this movement? And I mean, it's clearly not organic. And so, just from listening to you speak, you've mentioned Palm Springs trans activist group that teaches these things. So there's like actual groups going in and teaching these things. Maybe they're the pawns. You've mentioned the $25,000 surgery. So I mean, big pharma has an
Right.
incentive to provide the drugs and the surgeries. It's for profit. You have sort of the general Marxist thing, which would be to confuse people and tear down structures to replace them with who you want. And then we've kind of discussed the like suicidal empathy, which again is just somebody's telling you trans is you need to be supportive and shut up or you're a really bad person. And plenty of people are going along with that and they're kind of getting swept up in it and amplifying it. But who do you think is behind this movement? I mean, funding it might be the question.
There's, of course, you can see all different types of theories. I don't know if have the answer to that, but I do know, like here in California, um, we have these different committees at the legislature level, and it's a supermajority Democrats, and so there's a lot of strength in this. It's like the LGBTQ caucus. You can look up Scott Wiener's kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
And they're very successful at passing all of these bills of bringing in the indoctrination in the schools and in these laws, changing, birth records, legal documents, keeping secrets. So it's really become, this kind of far left Democrat. This is how we stay in power, and we have money supporting us. So, in California, I've noticed like there's unions that support it. Um,
Mm,
the California Teachers Union is very behind this, and so it's like if you give us what we want, we'll give you what you want, and we help people get elected at the local levels. Um, so and I don't know if it's who or what the world organizations are, but guys like is it Fitzer from Illinois, um, even Gavin
mm,
Newsom. I mean, these are men in leadership positions, that really do kind of make money off of this far left idea, and they've got the hospitals or the big pharma supporting them as well. So it's money and power, and that's you're also creating this whole group of young people that are going to vote for you, right? Because you're telling these kids that, they're gonna come after the trans, um, and, you're gonna lose your gender affirming medical care, and there are borders. I mean, they put it all together, so all these far left kind of Marxist ideas come in one bundle. But, yeah, I'm really disappointed in our unions and um, our California Teachers Association group, and, there's teachers that are looking to alternatives and trying to get out of that, and I'm thankful for them.
Mm.
So,
Um,
yeah.
Couple more questions, maybe two. Um, how do you recommend people protect their kids or help their kids through this?
Yeah, there's a lot of activities, I think, where you're less likely to see the social contagion, um, definitely
Okay.
sports, groups like, Future Farmers of America or the 4-H or activities like that. But then there's also groups and activities where you wouldn't know that they're so captured. And, the Boy Scouts, which I think is now called the Scouting of America, they've been completely captured by trans
Oh
ideology,
wow.
and same with Girl Scouts. So, a group that you would have thought, "Hey, this is great to have my daughter participate in this and get her badges and go on these camping trips," it's not safe anymore.
Oh wow.
And Davis, the, like, robotics club, totally captured by, trans activist, leaders. They have the robotics camp is now for girls and non-binary, or I think it says, like, and those kids that identify as girls. So
Oh boy.
yeah, I think you have
Well,
to
I'm
really
excited for the trans scout cookies though. That's I'm getting excited for those that release.
yeah. Um, yes, gosh, you just have to be so careful, and I wish I didn't have to say that. I really don't. I actually don't think right now, knowing what I know, I would send my child to a public school in California, even though we have excellent teachers, but it's permeated every part of their day, right, at the schools. And if you happen to have one of those quirky, kind of black and white thinker kids, they might all of a sudden think that, oh my God, I'm actually not a boy, I'm a girl, and I'm too scared to tell my mom. And so I'm just going to
Hmm.
feel, anxiety, anxiousness, and depression. And you're not going to tell your mom why, but because you watched, your kindergarten teacher show these books. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you do have to send your child to public school, I would be really careful that you have discussions with the teachers and look around the classroom at the books.
Yep.
Also know what's in the library. Um, and then just remind your child, every day, or I don't know, just that we are so lucky, to have our human bodies, and that there's no wrong way for you to ever be a boy. It doesn't matter what activities you like, but that your body is you. And just that kind of reminder that, there's nothing that will ever change, um, your biological sex, and who you are, and that, that you're going to be lucky one day if you become a father. And there's
Yeah.
so yeah, there's a lot of that. And of course, the social media and the phones, but a lot of it is just their friend group. And yeah, I'm hoping this will end soon. So parents like you who have younger kids, you won't have to worry, that your child will ever be medicalized, or cut
Yeah.
cut you off, because you kind of believe in reality. And I do think, maybe talking about fair sports, that to me, if you kind of talk to kids about, how women have more flexibility because we need to birth babies, but males, why they can jump higher or throw farther, or how their body's built, and their skeletal system, that you just kind of speak to the truth about how our bodies are different. Women's bodies
Yeah.
are amazing, we can grow a baby inside us, but men have these other things that make them, you know their much more successful in sports, especially with things like, weightlifting,
Yeah.
jumping. So just kind of
Again, this
reminding kids of that kind of thing. You don't want to,
yeah, I mean, the sad part is, again, I'm just thinking about my kids who are little, is they know all this stuff. They
yeah,
know all this stuff. They jump on my back from the couch when I'm not looking. They don't do that to their mom. They understand. And their mom's really strong and it was a great athlete. And
yeah,
still they get it. Like, you're not going to jump on mom, but yeah, you want to go crush dad, go ahead. Like, kids understand,
yeah.
they know all the truths.
Well, actually, the one other thing I wish I had done with my daughter, because if you talk about gender ideology to a teen or preteen, they're gonna be like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." But I think you could talk to your kids about things like the opioid crisis, or maybe lobotomies and or cults, and you could just watch shows like Dope
Hmm.
Sick. Um, I watched with my son the show South Park, because South Park really does make fun of a lot of these
Yeah.
kind of extreme ideas in a funny way, and it's
Yeah.
um, there's just lots of things out there that kind of bring up um or when people want to go along with some kind of belief because you want to be cool or fit in, and it really makes no sense. So
Yeah.
um there's some good stuff out there.
So last question, it could
Okay.
end up being a two-part question, but where do you think we are today in the cycle of this stuff? Has the mania peaked and passed, or is it continuing to grow? And then I guess, where do you think this all goes in the next decade, and then potentially in 50 years? What does this
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah, so I'm always an optimist, and I think that's why I'm able to spend so much time doing this, because I keep thinking, "Oh, we're almost at the end, the tide is turning, the house of cards is crashing down." So I actually thought 2 months ago when Leah Thomas I'm sorry, 2 years ago when Leah Thomas
Mm,
started competing in women's sports, that would peak everybody. I was like, "This is it. It's gonna be over." And
yeah.
then when, the W Path files came out, about what was happening in the UK and the
Yep.
cast reviews, I thought, "Oh, this is it. Everyone's gonna get it, right? We see how, how insane this gender medicine is." And so now I've become a little more realistic that it's not going to end overnight. Um, but you know, I uh, I loved seeing what came out of the was it Human Health Services a couple days ago. It's is Admiral Christine talking about how the
Hmm.
federal government knows all of this has been medical fraud and a scam, um, or a scandal. What's been going on with gender medicine? So and all of Trump's executive orders I thought have been incredible about, women's sports and federal prisons and school indoctrination. So I'm always hopeful that we're getting near the end. Uh, gosh, but I think it's going to take a while. I don't know how we're going to get it out of our public schools unless more parents start pulling their kids out, or at least letting your school board know that you don't want this. We
Hmm.
just need to give people more power to have a voice. Um, so yeah, I don't really know. I'm hopeful that maybe it's we're starting to go down. And yesterday I went to the university and I filmed the Trans Day of Remembrance. They had a march, right? Of you know
Yeah.
from trans students talking about trans rights, and I would say half of it was just staff and administrators, and the DEI groups who were marching, and just a handful of students. So,
Interesting.
yeah, it's definitely not growing, at that age group. So that makes me hopeful. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have to look at some more numbers. Kaiser Permanente is not doing surgeries anymore on anyone under 19, and Stanford's gender clinic shut down. Children's LA hospital shut down their gender clinic. So the lawsuits are really making a huge difference. And
That's those are all really
yeah,
good signs.
and I think the Supreme Court's going to hear in January the issue of males in women's sports. So that could be another huge, um, you know, chance for people to see how insane this has all been.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if we go out 100 years and try to put it in perspective, this is going to look like the Salem witch trials, like
Exactly.
this period of time that was like, wow.
Yeah.
And you always say when you're just living right now, you always say people were so crazy back then. And
Yeah.
it's hard to analyze what's crazy right now that you're living through. And 100% people in 100 years would be like, you guys were all nuts doing that. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I always wonder too, will my friends ever former friends ever apologize or say, "Sorry."
Oh, I can help with that, Beth. No.
Yeah, I do. I'm like, "Should I just move away from Davis?" But I still like it here, and I make new friends.
No, they'll just like kind of slowly,
Yeah,
you know, start talking again and stuff, but no one's ever going to apologize.
yeah.
It's the same with like the COVID
Right.
vaccine decision. I mean, no one's going to
Yeah.
apologize.
Yep.
Okay. What have we missed? Anything?
I think we covered it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today. Where should we send people so that they can follow your work?
I have, just my Twitter account is probably the best place, my X account.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Great.
And then I also, yeah, I put things on Facebook, and that's always set to public too. So that's, yeah, Beth Bourne was the other spot.
Okay. I'll link to those spots in the show notes below.
Yeah. Thanks. It's really nice to meet you.
You too. Thanks, Beth.
Okay.